Another common problem is the appearance of distracting digital noise in images. Although digital camera technology has improved significantly in the past decade, digital noise is still very common with the less expensive point-and-shoot cameras, and even with the highest quality camera when you use it in very low light situations such as photographing at night, or as we saw in the previous tutorial where we really move the shadow slider in the basic panel over to the right in order to see into the shadow area of the image. The first thing you'll want to do before you start removing your noise is you need to view your image at 100%. So typically I would just select 100% here, but I'm actually going to go to 200% because I know that when this video is compressed, it's going to be a little difficult to see the subtle removal of noise. So hopefully we'll be able to see this at 200%. Then I'll scoot over to the detail panel, and we're going to focus in on the noise reduction area. You'll notice that we have two areas to reduce noise. We can reduce noise in the luminance or in the color of the image. So right now I see a lot of what we call Christmas tree artifacting, this digital noise where you see kind of these greens and magentas, especially in the flatter areas like a sky. In order to remove that, I'll start moving the color slider over to the right, and you can see quite quickly that all of that distracting color noise has now been removed. There is a color detail slider that we can also use in order to try to keep the color detail in the image, but you'll notice on something like this, we're not going to see a huge difference even if we move the sliders really dramatically. When we move to the luminance slider, you have to be much more careful. You don't want to be very heavy-handed here, because if I move this all the way to the right, although all the noise is removed, the image is losing detail. It's losing sharpness, and it's losing kind of its texture so that it looks really fake. So let's back off on the luminance. I still want some detail in even the sky here. The way that you control how much detail you keep is with the detail slider. Again, I'm going to make a really drastic move here in hopes that we can see this after the video has been compressed. If I move it all the way to the left, I'm trying to tell Camera Raw that I want to get rid of as much noise as possible, even if that costs me a little bit of detail in my image. If I move it all the way to the right, I'm telling Camera Raw that yes, I want to get rid of noise, but the detail in the image is super important, so try to keep as much detail as possible. So usually you'll find just a good balance somewhere right around in the middle. Of course, this will depend on the content of your image. There is another slider called luminance contrast. Now, what this can do is, let's say we really move the luminance slider over so that the sky is just kind of this one solid color. The luminance contrast, if I move it over to the right, you'll notice that it adds back in kind of a mottled sky. The one thing to be really careful with is if you're working with faces or skin tones, be careful with the luminance contrast. You really don't want to move it over too far to the right, or you'll start getting kind of this unnatural modeling in the skin tone. So let's back off on the contrast, and I'm also going to back off on the luminance slider. I want enough noise in there so that it looks like there's detail, but I just don't want that distracting noise where I'm looking at the noise instead of the image. A good rule of thumb is that visually, as long as the noise isn't distracting, then the eye isn't going to mind.